Yeah, so he's the local director of our symphony orchestra. Like Guelph is about, I don't know if you know where we are. We're about an hour west of Toronto, city about
Hmm.
150,000. So he directs our symphony, but he also directs the Baton Rouge Symphony and a symphony in Montreal. So he just flies into town. He comes in, a couple times a year and works them for a week and whatnot. So
Yeah.
we're the only high school here that has an orchestra. So he always comes and works with my kids, which is great. So he was in today. Adam did a great job. It was super fun. It always makes my job easier when I get to sit and watch as opposed to be on the podium.
Yeah.
So it was cool. It was great.
Did you get some ideas?
Always, always. I
Okay.
learn more from watching other people than anything else. Like I love clinicians and working with my kids because I'll just sit and like soak it in, see things that they do and go, oh, that's a really cool way. Like we all tell them the same things: use more air, use more bow, do more phrasing, do more with your articulating. But they might have a different way to say it than I do, and it's so useful to just hear a kind of different approach. I love it.
Yeah.
Big fan.
It's great. Well, welcome
Yeah.
everybody to the Growing Band Director Podcast. That's episode number 122 here with
Woo.
Dan Austin. Dan, did you see the little logo that I came up with?
I did. I'm not quite that jacked. I'll do my best to try to live up to that, but that's
No,
pretty awesome.
it was funny. Like I was playing with some things, and then my coworker Joey's like, "Just put it on the head." It was we had a moment. So he's the creative director, I guess.
Love it. Love
Yeah.
it.
So we're going to be here talking about a number of different things, but number one's going to be sort of like your fitness journey and the band director fitness space and all those sorts of things. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm gonna go way back. Like when I first started teaching in my mid 20s, I'm gonna go way back because I think the story's familiar to a lot of people. Let's put it that way. I was still trying to be a professional musician and a teacher at the same time. And a typical day for me, I'd get up at 6 a.m. and I lived right in downtown Toronto. Would go down to a coffee shop, might have like a muffin and a coffee to start my day.
Mm.
And now that I'm living a much healthier lifestyle, I realize that's a terrible way to start your day. And then I get in my car, I drive to school, I would teach all day, wouldn't take a lunch normally. Like it was a middle school music program, so they're all beginning and maybe a little developing band stuff. And then I'd drive home, and it was an early release school, so I was back in my apartment by about 3. And at that point, I might have like a microwave burrito, and then I would go to sleep for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
Get up at 8 o'clock at night. And my roommate at that time, who was the drummer in my band, was home. We would go down to the pub underneath us, have dinner down there, fish and chips, burger and fries, whatever. Terrible, terrible eating. And then we would go work at night. We'd play in clubs, we'd be in rehearsal halls. We did a couple indie albums where we're doing studio time where we're not paying hourly rates, but we have to work what they're available. So it wouldn't be uncommon for us to start a session at 10 at night, go till 2 in the morning, and I'd get back to my apartment, maybe get 3 more hours sleep and go and do it all again the next day. And that's a sustainable lifestyle when you're 25 and single. When you're 30 and married, it's not so sustainable. When you're 35 married with kids, it's almost impossible. And I finally got to like my early 40s, and I was just a train wreck physically, mentally, emotional. Like everything was just falling apart. Like I was about 300 pounds. Like I'm a big person to begin with, but I was well overweight. I'm sleeping really poorly. I've got hip problems. I've got knee problems. I'm pre-diabetic. I'm doing all these things where I'm like, I haven't taken care of myself
Yeah.
at all. And I know, a lot of music teachers do this when we're young because we're still trying to do everything. And so the funny thing is the best thing that ever happened to me was the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, I had to stop. And, we as musicians, our world completely changed in a matter of days. Like we had always grown up in a time where there was constantly music in our lives, right? Like from the time I can remember, there was a show, there was a rehearsal, there was whatever. And now there's nothing. There's literally nothing. And I'm lost. Like I didn't know what to do with myself, kind of went to this funk depression type thing. And then in the September following the lockdown, when schools reopened in Ontario, they were heavily restricted, like very, very restricted. We could not play brass or woodwind instruments. So I'm just doing like bucket drumming with my kids and trying to find something to keep them through the day. And I kind of hit a point in October that year where I'm like, I need a break. I got to get out of here. I said to my wife, let's go somewhere. And we rented a cottage up in the about 4 hours north of where we lived. Got away, a place where we didn't have to wear masks, a place where we didn't have to, we could just get away. And I was up there sitting there. I remember sitting on this dock, and I'm out on the dock in my sweater. It's October in Canada, it's cold, and I've got a bottle of wine, having a drink, and I said, man, I got to do something right now because I'm just in a really bad space. And I don't know why. Something just occurred to me. I'm like, you know what? I have something I've never had before, and that's time. I have nothing but time. I don't have a rehearsal to run. I don't have a show to prepare for. I can barely teach under these new restrictions anyways. So I'm like, what am I going to do with this time? And I thought, man, I've always wanted to try to get in better shape. It's one of those things in my life I'd put off, I hadn't done. And I decided, yeah, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I started off, my wife bought me for my birthday, which was a few weeks later, some barbells. And I just started doing a little bit of lifting in my basement. I started walking and, eating a little better. And typical of people who lose weight, I lost 10 pounds pretty quick and then put like 5 back on. And I'm like, man, this isn't working. And right around that time, it was about New Year's, and I saw a post on Facebook from one of my former students. And she was a personal trainer, and she had, it's the pandemic, so she's trying to figure out a way to make a living. And she was advertising virtual personal training. I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder how that works. So I contacted her and I said, Sid, how does this work? And she said, well, I'll do an in-person session with you. We'll wear a mask, we'll socially distance, and I'll kind of get a gauge of where you're at and figure out, and I'll design some eating better for you, some exercising better for you, and you implement it in the way that works in your life. And it's all done through an app. We'll track your weight, your food. We'll do some basic measurement stuff. And I said, okay, cool. This sounds fun. She goes, and it was really cool. She did this. She goes, I'll give you the first couple months for free. Try it out. If you don't like it, you don't have to continue. And it was amazing. And that was almost 3 years ago that I started this process. And she's still my personal trainer that I work with. I still do it virtually, and yeah, it costs money, but we invest money in all kinds of things. Why not invest money in ourselves, right? It's the cost of a nice meal out. It's not that much money.
And just to interrupt real quick,
Yeah.
one thing my wife says is that it costs a lot of money to be sick.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
People talk about the money you spend to do things right, but you're going to spend at least that much when you're not well.
Absolutely. And especially even the eating, because my go-to was, okay, I'll grab something in a drive-through, and you start adding that up in a month, that's hundreds of dollars. So a personal trainer is nothing compared to what I was spending before. Mm-hmm. And we started this personal training journey, and, I'm now at a point where I've lost about 70 pounds of fat off my body, gained some muscle. I've really fallen in love with biking. I did running, and I found running hard. As I said, I'm built like a football lineman. I'm a big human being, so running was not the best thing for me. But biking has been fantastic. So I'm at the point now where I'm just shy of 3,000 kilometers biked over the last 3 years, and that's pretty good for Canada because there's about 5 or 6 months of biking is not an option. And I lift now pretty regularly. I have a pretty set routine. The biggest change is how I eat. And, it's funny. All of these things have just helped me in every facet. Like, you wouldn't imagine it would help you as a band director, but it did.
Totally.
It totally did. Yeah. And even like the way that I approach my teaching, I think about how I train, because like, when I train, I don't set a goal of like, I'm going to lose 50 pounds by this date, because when you do that, you're going to do something crazy that will allow you to do that, but it's not a sustainable thing. My whole approach to this training thing is good habits consistently all the time.
Yeah.
And guess what? That's how I teach music. That if I teach my kids good habits consistently all the time on their instruments and in their rehearsal technique, they're going to play well when it comes time to play, right? And so all of these things have really helped me. I've been really shocked at how it's worked. And of course, obviously, I feel better. I don't get sick as much as I used to. I can make it through a day much easier. And I've got a set routine, and I become really good about here's my routine for the week, and I stick with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and consistency is far more important than intensity, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So what is your routine? Are you a before school or are you after school?
I am, and right after dinner worked well for me. I always tell people, like, you got to figure out what works best for your lifestyle, because some people the morning thing works good. It also depends, like the way my school is set up. I run a lot of my small ensemble rehearsals in the morning, so I'll get up in the morning. Like a day for me would look like this. I'll get up in the morning, and the first thing I do actually is I walk my dog. So I go for a walk. I get outside. It's only, about 15 minutes, but it
And
gets.
that's huge. That's huge. Getting outdoor time, even if it's not as light as you want it to be, like outdoor time, it's everything.
And a little bit of movement to start your day. It just gives you that kick to go. And there are days I don't want to do it, but I force myself to do it. I get up and I do a little bit of movement. I come home. I eat pretty much the same thing every day for breakfast. I have oatmeal with protein whey powder in it. I have a spoonful of peanut butter, about half a cup of cottage cheese, and a coffee. That is the way I start my day. I don't want to give up my coffee. I love coffee. It's not, I'm not going to do that. But that's my start, and it gives me a good amount of protein to start a day. I feel good, and I can go to school, and I run a morning, usually I said section or small ensemble rehearsals, teach throughout the day. For lunch every day, it's some sort of protein. So it can be like something like chicken or turkey. It could also be like a good quality protein bar, some Greek yogurt, an apple, and usually some more cottage cheese. The other thing is I drink water all day. I have water bottles in my room. I'm
Huge.
constantly staying hydrated. And then, teach in the afternoon. I usually run my ensemble rehearsals during our lunch hour. We have a fairly substantial lunch hour, and it works well. So I do eat quickly, but I do make sure that I eat. And then I'll go home at the end of the day. That's sort of my time with my kids where I can hang out with them. If I'm really having like a busy week, I might, crash, have a little nap or something like that. But then I'll get dinner ready. And then right after dinner, that's sort of the hour that I dedicate to my exercise. My routine is pretty typical to anybody who's in these sort of things. I do 3 days a week of lifting. So I do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I actually do it right here at my school. I'm quite lucky. We have a weight room in the school. I have a pass key, and my night custodian and my phys ed department are amazing. They're like, yeah, man, go ahead. Nobody's in there. So I use it at night. And on a Monday is usually chest and arms. Wednesday is legs and shoulders. Friday's full body. And then cardio on the days in between, on the Tuesdays and Thursdays. Some days it'll be biking, and I can bike, if I get a good hour in, that's going to be 18 to 20K. If I can go longer, great. If it's winter, I'll often just use the rowing machine. I like the rowing machine, or ride the stationary bike. And so that's kind of my routine for those 5 days. And then I take the weekends to relax. I like to keep that as my family time as much as possible. And, we also, in our band directing jobs, like I have parades sometimes with my marching bands. I'll have festivals that come up. So the weekends can get kind of busy. But that Monday to Friday routine is pretty set. It's pretty normal. For a dinner, I'll eat, kind of anything as long as it's not crazy. Because I've eaten really well my breakfast and lunch, but some sort of protein, some sort of carbohydrate. If I'm going to eat something that's not healthy, I'm going to go for it. I'm not going to go halfway. Like if it's pizza night, man, I'm eating pizza. It's fine. It's something I learned from my trainer, and she told me really early on that a lot of people fail in a fitness journey because they think that they've failed too early. Like they get really hard on themselves. They're like, oh, I had this terrible weekend. I'm not doing this. And they quit really early. She's like, you can't expect to be perfect all the time, right? Like you're not going to eat absolutely perfectly all the time. You're going to have to grab a drive-through at some point. You're going to go out with your friends and eat a meal that's high in fat. That's okay to do it. Just don't do it every day.
And one of the things I think that a lot of people don't think about is like when you're doing your fitness journey, like this is your life. This is like, we're talking about a lifestyle. We're not talking about for the next 3 months. We're not talking about for the year. You want to do this as long as you're alive, right?
Oh,
So it's like, even if you have ups and downs, it's not a short-term solution. This is a long-term deal.
Yeah. And the sustainability is so huge too. Like that was the mistake that I had made, typical of a lot of people. I always tried to like get a little healthier and lose weight. And you try these kind of fad diets where I'm not going to eat this and I'm not going to eat, and none of that's sustainable. You
Nope.
can't keep that going. So you end up having 2 or 3 good months and then you fall off and you lose weight and it comes back. And it's like, the old saying, like I've lost 80 pounds, but I've lost the same 10 pounds 8 times, right? Like, it doesn't do you any good. So that's why my approach to this was totally different. And it
Yeah.
was just very much, I want to establish some good habits of eating and good habits of exercise and go with it. And I'm not going to worry about how much weight I lose. I'm not going to worry about these things. I'm just going to live this way and see what happens. And, there are times that I'll go months and I haven't lost weight. Or, there was a point where I was getting really frustrated. I'm like, man, I'm just, nothing seems to be changing. And my trainer's like, yeah, have you measured your body fat percentage and your muscle? I'm like, no. And I looked and I'm like, oh, I actually have lost weight. I didn't even notice because I'd put the equivalent amount of muscle on. So there's all of those types of things that you don't think about, but the sustainability is the biggest part. You want to be sustainable throughout it. And it's hard for us to bring it back to the whole music directing thing. Our lives as music directors is crazy, right? Like, you can probably, I'm sitting in a practice room right now. I can hear a kid practicing a couple over from me on the drums. Like, I don't teach a normal kind of job where I get in here and I, teach my classes and I go home. Like, I have rehearsals to run. I have festivals to be at. I have all these other things. Like, when we are teaching as music teachers, we're on all the time.
Yep.
There's never a time where you step back and the kids just kind of like, you're always the person on the podium. You're always the one giving them the feedback. You're always the one who, like, they can't perform without me there. Like, that's something that we just don't do in our profession. So you can burn out really fast in this job if you don't take care of yourself. And I've done it. I've been there where I just absolutely crash because I have nothing left. And I don't do that as much anymore because I've become way better at eating healthier, living healthier, but also balancing my schedule. And I have a very set schedule I follow, which is way better, way better.
I gotta say, like, I have so much that I want to unpack from all that. You had all these points that I and I don't think either one of us are what we would consider fitness experts, right? But just people who we just live the band director life and both try to be fit. So I want to go back to the food real quick. You mentioned protein a lot, and this is something that I think a lot of people don't think about enough. You and I haven't talked numbers or anything like that, but I've heard when it comes to protein, especially for, most people, that we're talking about 3/4 of your body weight in grams a day, give or take, and if a lot of people actually calculated their protein, they would see they're just far too low. They just don't have enough protein. It's really, really important. Secondly, people avoid carbs and fat. Like, they've been told that like carbs and fat are bad. Carbs are important. Fat is what delivers, it allows the vitamins that you take in to actually go to your bloodstream and work. Am I correct with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So people talk about like, get low fat this, or don't have these carbs. And it's like, no, your body needs all these things as long as you're doing it in a healthy way.
Yeah. And so the app that I use with my trainer tracks all that. It shows me my daily intake of when I enter my diet into the app, it shows me like how much protein I've eaten, how much carbohydrates, and how much fat. And when I was first doing this, I was too low in the fats. And my trainer's like, you need to eat more fat. And I'm like, really? Like, I always thought that was wrong. She's like, no. She says, you have to eat the right kind of fat, but you have to eat more fat. Because the saturated trans fats are not good. Those are the ones that are not natural fats, the deep fried kind of food. But other fats that you get from nuts and beans and those kind of things, your body needs those. If you hit too much of one, you're not going to live balanced. And what I really notice is that I don't yo-yo in energy like I used to.
Right, completely.
Like, I sit at a level of energy from the beginning of the day to the end that is pretty consistent. I don't ever crash. I don't ever go too high, because what I would do before is I would load up on sugars and carbs, which would shoot my body feeling great. And then an hour later, I'm way back down again. And I'm exhausted and I'm tired. And I'm like, well, I just ate a whole ton of food, but I didn't eat any protein.
And that's when you're worse. That's when your third band comes in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. And you just said, and you have nothing left. Like, I always joke with my kids, because like, you got my morning classes and my afternoon classes are both grade 9 classes, and I try to deliver the same to them, right? But
Totally different.
a couple of years ago, by the time I was hitting the end of the day, I was so done that I could barely deliver any sort of quality. The clarity of my mind wasn't there like it was. Like the thing I was explaining in the morning that I explained no problem, I was having trouble explaining it to the kids in the afternoon. So even eating that way. The other thing is drinking water. Like I drink water like crazy, and I barely drink anything else. I do love coffee, but I don't drink any soda pop. I do sometimes add a little bit of the like Mio flavoring to my water, a little bit of a squirt thing to give it a little flavor, but generally it's just water. And even that, I feel so much better. I don't get headaches. My body feels better just by drinking a ton of water. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about starting your day. Morning workouts during COVID. I was great. I was working out first thing in the morning and then doing all the stuff I had to do. But my school was actually shut down for the band program for 689 days. So we actually didn't. I didn't go in that for. We had like remote school, and then we had the fire. We had a fire and like all the things. So I was able to spend a ton of time. I have a home gym, and I was able to get some weights. And I did this thing. If anybody's looking to build a bench. Like we have a bench, but like a rack for your barbell. You just take like the Home Depot bucket with some gallons of water. Cement, and then you can put in 2x4s in a certain way where you can rest the bar on it. And I put it against the back of my the frame of my basement. And again, I was able to stay home. Anyway, the point is, I was able to do that in the morning, and it worked amazing for me when I was here doing what I had to do at my house. The minute I had to go off and be a band director at 7 a.m. If I get up at 5, and I know a lot of people swear by the work out hard before you eat. I know there's a lot of science behind all of that, and I'm not saying it's wrong. But for me as a band director, if I was going to put myself under that much stress before I even walked out the door, that wasn't right for me. So I chose it when I went back to full-time band directing, I had to change it up a little bit. So on the weekends, I will work out in the morning and maybe before breakfast. But when I'm at school, it's going to be an after-school sort of deal.
Yeah, and I tried the morning thing, and it just doesn't work for me. It's not, it wasn't right, and I really like the working out after dinner because it does tire me out a little bit. Like, a lot of us in the music world, when you think about like if I'm directing my ensembles, I direct, 4 or 5 ensembles. I've got all these scores running in my head. I've got all these rehearsals. I need to shut my brain down at some point. And it's hard. It's really hard, especially when you're getting close to festivals or concerts or whatnot. So the working out actually helps me shut my brain off because I'm focused on that. For that hour, I am now thinking about nothing but that. I don't listen to music when I work out. I throw on podcasts or sometimes it's nothing. And I just shut my brain off. And I found that it helped me sleep because I was a little bit physically tired. My brain had had a chance to rest. So the evening workout works great for me. Having said that, I know lots of people who are the morning. My father-in-law is a machine, and he works out every morning. Every morning. That's always been his pattern. And, he loves it because he's retired. He goes to the gym and he sees his gym buddies and they're all there at the same time. But it just didn't work for me. The morning thing was not my way.
One thing I think that you understand that I'm trying to hope a lot of younger people understand, like if younger teachers learn to take care of themselves earlier, I think that's a huge win. But I think you also have to be willing to work really hard in your job because I think there's this dichotomy right now of people like want a lot of me time and self-care time, but they're not willing to put in the work that it takes to build a good program, right? Yeah. So like finding that balance between how do I do this right for me, but how do I also put in the time that's needed at work so that my program grows?
Oh yeah, and I have a very set schedule of how there are certain hours a day that I'm dedicated. Like when I am from the time I get here in the morning, which is about 8 a.m. till about 3:30, 4 o'clock, that's my band time. That's when I'm directing. I am running my ensembles, I'm running my rehearsals, and that's that time. And my workout time is, as I said, right after dinner each night, but I only need an hour. I don't need to be dedicating a ton of other time. And I'm very clear, like I have a calendar where I have everything scheduled in. I have my rehearsals written down, I have my workout schedule, but I also know like my son's got basketball practice tonight. I have to take my daughter to her, she's working with the music theater production at her school. I know when all these are, so I'm balancing time between everything. But I've always I believe in this job, we have to, if you're not trying to develop a really strong music program, like, why are you doing it? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's what makes this job so rewarding. I'm not saying you have to be the best. You don't have to win every festival. You don't have to, it's not about that, but you want to, if I'm going to do this job and dedicate 30 years of my life to it, I want to do it right. I want to
Yeah.
make sure that I am getting the most out of it, but the kids are getting the most. Like, why I ended up teaching music is because I grew up in a great high school music program that really inspired me. And I'm like, I want to give that to my kids. I want to give them what I had so
Mm-hmm.
that they can choose where they want to go with it. And, you know, I often say, I've worked with some young teachers in some mentoring program stuff, and I had the real honor to go back to the university I went to and do some guest lecturing in their music education classes. And I said to the kids, what we actually are doing in this job is we are building community. We are teaching these kids how to be part of something that's bigger than them and how to do it at a high level, right? We're not accepting from them that they just play the notes and rhythms correctly. They have to learn how to do this well. And that's a skill they can take with them throughout their lives. The fact that it's a musical instrument is wonderful, but it doesn't have to be. Like, that's just the tool that we happen to use.
Mm-hmm.
What we're teaching them is how to be proficient at something at a high level and demanding that of themselves. And that is so valuable. It's so valuable in what we
Mm-hmm.
do in these jobs, man. And as I said, music happens to be what I love and what the tool I use to do that. But that's what you're giving these kids. And if you're not doing it right, then what's the point of doing it? If you're just
Mm-hmm.
going to go in, teach 9 to 5, you're not going to do the ensembles, you're not going to do the performance, you're not teaching them anything. You're not giving them the opportunity to be part of something. So
A couple more things I want to hit before we leave the fitness topic.
yeah.
Why should people lift weights if they're not used to lifting weights? Because the biggest thing is, I don't want to lift weights, I'm going to get bulky, which is like, yeah, rubbish.
Well, I just to say you don't have to lift that way. Like, one of the things that I've learned in the lifting is that there's different ways to lift. So there are days that I do low weight, high rep.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm only doing about 50% of the weight load that I can do, but I'm doing 20 or 30 reps on it. And then there's other days, and I usually rotate this from week. So usually the first week of the month I do the low weight, high rep, and then the next week is medium, and then the third week is going to be high weight, low rep. And so you don't have to bulk up. You can tone, you can do all this. But the other thing that anybody who works out will tell you is lifting weight burns more fat than cardio. Like, it's the exercise that actually is better for you. You are getting your heart rate moving a lot quicker. It's using more of your muscle mass. It's doing all of these things that is getting you a better workout than cardio. Now, I found for my body, if I really want to lose weight, I have to do both. If I'm going to I want to lose 5 pounds. I want to really cut weight from my body. I have to do a good balance of both for me, but not everybody's like that. Everybody's, metabolism is different. Everyone's a little bit different in how they work, but the lifting is actually what takes off the weight a lot faster. And I have not bulked up a ton. I was already a big person, but I have more definition, more muscle mass, but I'm not bulky. I'm not, you don't become jacked by doing that, because there's a very specific way to lift if you want to do that. And that's not how I lift. So,
yeah, I think it's just important that people do it. That weights it's important. Even if we're just talking about body weight, you can do great body weight workouts, but and then if you lift for long enough, meaning you talk about high rep, then it almost turns into cardio, right?
Oh yeah.
That's cardio and lifting. And sometimes they want you to lift less, and with more space in between, so you're not doing cardio.
Yeah. I have a workout that my trainer gives me, which is just with resistance bands and really short intervals between exercises. And that is easily one of the hardest exercises. Like, that's way harder than when I'm benching my most weight that I can bench. Those workouts, the resistant band stuff, like, you can do incredible workouts with almost no equipment. Like body weight workout, resistance band stuff, very simple weights. I was surprised because during the pandemic, when I started this process with her, I couldn't go to a gym. No gyms were open. I couldn't use my school gym. It was locked down, all this stuff. So I was using stuff that I was like buying weights offline and picking, Amazon delivering stuff. So I didn't have a lot to work with. I had a kettlebell, a couple barbells, and a few resistance bands. And I did a year's worth of workout with that,
Yeah.
if you use them right. And like, I love having a trainer because she is designing my exercises specifically to me. But you can find all of this online. Like, there's all of these exercises. Like, if you want
Yeah.
to know how to work out, it takes seconds of research to find
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and one thing I want to talk about too is the fitness industry. I think it's done a really good job about making fitness about losing weight.
Mhm.
Like losing weight, I think is really good for a lot of people, but there's also a lot of people who get way more fit, and as they bulk up and as they build more muscle, they gain weight.
Yeah.
And people look at the number and they're like, "Oh, I'm way worse now because of the number," but you're way healthier, you're way stronger, you're more
Yep.
functional in your life. So there's a lot of people who subscribe to the throw away the scale and just
Yeah.
live, eat well, sleep well, which we're going to talk about in a second, and exercise well, and the weight's going to take care of itself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, it's been amazing. I Whenever you go through this, and anybody who's ever gone through this kind of fitness journey, is that you lose weight very quickly at first. Your body will cut pretty fast, and then you're going to plateau for a long time.
Yep.
And I was expecting, like, oh, I'm just going to shed all this stuff, and she's like, if you do this properly, my trainer said, if you're working out properly, you'll lose weight, and then your body will adjust. And then you'll lose weight and your body will adjust. Your body needs a time to adjust to your new setup, how your body's working. It has to figure it out before it's ready to make a change. So you can't expect massive weight drop all the time. And I'm now at a point where, I could stand to lose a little more weight, but I'm not going to lose a whole lot more. My body's kind of comfortable at where it's at, and I'm good with that. But as you said, it's a lifestyle. I've now learned a way how to live like this, and there's so many other benefits beyond just having lost weight, like just having a stronger body and core. Like, in my band class, I'm standing all day on my feet. I don't have I was at the point where, like, I was going to get MRIs done on my hip, and they were talking about maybe doing surgery and stuff. I don't have any of those problems anymore because my body core is stronger. I'm not carrying as much weight. Even though I do have more muscle mass, it's in a different kind of place, and it's a whole different kind of balance thing. So my whole body feels better, and I'm able to just function on a day-to-day basis better. How I sit, how I eat, how I lie down, how I move around, everything is different, and you just feel better. So yeah.
And for anybody who's really into this, there's a great not episode. There's a great podcast. I don't know if you know it. It's called Mind Pump.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
I mean, Mind Pump's one of the top podcasts in the world, and it's amazing the stuff that you can learn. So I'll push that podcast. Last thing I want to talk about in this area is sleep, and there's I'm sure there's many sleep experts who are awesome. If people are looking to hear more on podcasts about sleep, a great name to search in your podcast platform is Matt Walker, and he's been on a ton of famous podcasts, and he has a lot of amazing tips about sleep. So tell us about your sleep schedule.
Yeah, I go to bed pretty early. I want to have a good sustained sleep. I find I need that 8 to 9 hours of sleep. That is very typical for me because I do get up early. I'm going to get up around 6 a.m. Just to start my day. That's my routine. I do go to bed pretty early, and I try to be like, I know it's going to take my mind a little bit of time to shut down. And I think that's important. Our music teacher brains can get going. And I used to be awful at this, where I would lay in bed and just be running rehearsals through my head like, man, what's the next thing I need to do? And I've gotten a routine. For me, podcasts are great. I love listening to a podcast. And because my brain's involved, but it's not my musical brain. It's a different part of my brain.
Sure.
And I can sit back, I can listen. I find just listening to the human voice quite relaxing. So I'll do that for, 15, 20 minutes before I go to bed. And I'm lying in the dark listening to that, and I can start to feel, I'm like, okay, I'm ready. And I take the headphones out, and I just go to sleep. And I get a pretty good sustained sleep now. When I was younger, I didn't have that. I was not sleeping well. And the value of good sleep is just so important. So important. Your body has to reset. And being in better shape helps you sleep too, because your body's ready to rest. Like when I do have my workout days, my body is ready. I am physically tired enough that I'm ready to go to bed when it's time, and I get myself to sleep. And it's kind of funny. Every now and then, I'll miss a workout. Like last night was parent-teacher interviews at my school. So I couldn't get my workout in because I was here later doing interviews with parents. And then last night I'm like, oh, I can't get to sleep. And I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, oh, right. I didn't work out today. So I got up and I went for a walk
Hmm.
and I came back and I'm like, okay, now I'm ready. Like your body gets to the point where it has its routine now and it's ready to sleep. So,
And I'm not, this may sound funny, but I think it's true. When you get a good night's sleep, the next day your band sounds better.
oh yeah,
And the reason is because I think because you're in a better mood, you're more stable, and then you can like rationalize and you can deal with all the things, and it's not the end of the world. You can be more
yeah,
positive. It just changes your whole outlook.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And
and sometimes people will even go to bed on the weekends. They'll go to bed really late, right? And then they'll sleep in, and then Monday morning they have jet lag because
yeah.
they gave themselves jet lag. Even if you can consistently, that's what the sleep, experts say. So if you can consistently keep a pretty solid morning routine, even on the weekends, that's going to help you even more.
Yeah, and it's fun. The totally unrelated, but it works. Is like right around the time I started getting shape, we bought a dog for the first time, and my dog he knows exactly when it's 6:30 in the morning.
Hmm.
He's at my side of the bed. He's like, "It's walk time. Let's do this." So I'm up every day at the same time. Like I seldom will sleep in or go to bed late because I've got a set sort of schedule for my day. Like on the weekends, I love the fact I can just sit and relax for a few hours in the morning. I don't have to get up and go to work and all that,
Hmm.
but I'm still up. I'm up. And having that routine of sleep is great because now it's pretty consistent. It's good.
Okay, so next we're going to dive into some Canadian band repertoire. We have
Awesome.
five pieces that we're going to check out here that you recommended that I'm looking forward to hearing.
Yeah.
And we have one at a grade point 0.5, a grade 1, a grade 2, a grade 3, and a grade 4. So
Yeah.
I think we'll
Cool.
even go in that order.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll jump in quick because so one of the things that's really cool in Canada that they've done, we have a national music festival. So because of our population being smaller, there's 36 million people, whatever. We have what's called Music Fest Canada National, and they have done a mandate about 10 years ago that every concert band that performs at the festival has to play Canadian repertoire. We have to play at least one piece of Canadian repertoire. And it's really exposed all Canadian music teachers to a ton of
hmm.
Canadian repertoire that maybe we weren't even aware of, and has really helped Canadian composers. So every group plays at least one piece that is Canadian at that festival. So, yeah.
You provided me with the Music Fest Canada national syllabus. Is that
Yep.
like the list
That's
of
the one.
those tunes?
So yeah, the syllabus has all pieces on it, but about well, I'd say 50% of them are Canadian. So they mark the ones that are Canadian on the syllabus. But if you choose a piece off the syllabus that is not Canadian, you need to play a Canadian piece. Like the woman who runs the concert band division, a lady named Sharon Fitzsimmons, will literally email you going, "Hey, you don't have a Canadian piece. Like you got to get a Canadian piece."
Mhm.
And it's a really cool initiative that they've done. So yeah,
That's great. I'm looking forward to hearing.
yeah,
So let's talk about the point 0.5. And
yeah,
again, I think all grade levels are a little fungible, right? In certain places, something might be a 2 and it might be a 1 somewhere else, and whatever. I'm always a big advocate for listen to the piece, study the music. If it's right for your kids, do it.
yeah,
There'll be times when my wife, who's a great middle school teacher, will say, "They call that a point 0.5? There's no way." And she'll
yeah.
go because of this, and this, or whatever. So people can disagree with our leveling all they want.
Sure.
So this is Heroes Processional by Ryan Meeboer.
Yep. It's an absolutely awesome piece. It's one I've done with my students a few times. What I really like about it, it's great for young band because like you have to write a point 0.5, you've got to have some skill as a composer because
Yeah.
you've got a very small palette of ranges and rhythms and instrumentation to use. And Ryan writes so well at this level because that's what he teaches. Like he's a middle school music teacher and works with a lot of beginning band stuff. And it just you can play this and your audience goes, wow, that's a really enjoyable piece. They don't listen to it and go, oh, this is easy. Like he's a real has a real knack for that. And it's a great piece because it's got this nice sort of brass fanfare-ish quality to it without it being too difficult. And I think that's really good. It is repetitive at times, but you don't get bored of it. He's got the pacing down. He has the formula really, really down for writing it this style. And I quite enjoy that about the piece.
Great. Let's check it out. Here's Heroes Processional. Okay, the next one is grade 1 called After the Rain, and we're going to have video on this one as well by Matt Neufeld.
Yeah, it's a brand new piece, just released this year, and it was something that Randall Standridge got me hooked onto. So we had the honor last year of having Randall come up to Guelph, and he worked with our schools up here, and we did a big concert with him. And we were talking about repertoire and Canadian repertoire, and he goes, "Have you heard Matt?" I'm like, "No, I'm not familiar." And he goes, "I just signed him to my publishing company. He's got this piece coming out," and he played it for me. I'm like, "Wow, this is perfect. I really like it." It's a really interesting lyrical piece for a grade 1 level because it does some harmonic things you don't expect. It's quite lush in its orchestration. There's quite a lot of parts where the entire band is playing. And it's really well crafted. It has this beautiful sort of breakdown section and this rain effect that's happening in your mallet percussion. But it is still a grade 1. It is still attainable by a young band. There are a couple really interesting little surprises in it. This little bar 2/4 he throws in at the end to kind of throw you off. A couple little chord progressions that are not as common in grade 1 pieces. And I think it's just really, as a lyrical grade 1 goes, one of the more interesting ones I've heard recently.
Great, let's check it out. Here's After the Rain by Matt Neufeld. Yeah, we were just talking about how the sixth sense that we have as band directors, when you're working on a piece and you decide to bail on it for whatever reason, sometimes you found a better piece that you recently heard, or sometimes it just doesn't fit them the right way. So, like, do you have any advice for younger teachers who, like, how do I know when to push through something, or how do I know when to change pieces?
Yeah, that's a tough question. It's something that the better you can know your kids, and the better you can kind of know how repertoire works, right? I spend a lot of time choosing my repertoire, a lot, and then sometimes it'll come up and the kids will bring it in. They've worked on it a bit. We play through it a bit, and I go, yeah, no, it doesn't work. So don't be afraid to change. Don't be afraid to change stuff on it. But you have to kind of think big picture, and you have to ask yourself, what is the risk reward, right? Is it worth continuing to persevere on this piece and really drive through something that may not work for them if I'm not going to get anything out of it? But if there is like an end goal, like this piece is going to lead us to something, sometimes you do have to just kind of dig in and go with it. But I find usually within the first couple months of the school year, I can figure out where we're at and what's working for my kids. So
Yeah, it's great, and especially young teachers, they're not gonna get it right away. It just takes time.
no, don't be afraid to experiment. Like I often will start with something lyrical right away and see what they do with it and go, okay, that's where we're at. Okay, so let's see, where do I want to go and what's going to be a good direction. I have a few fallback pieces, a few fallback composers. Like, I love Brian Bolmage's Rippling Watercolor, which is like a
Yeah,
nice grade two that for a high school group that's sort of in that 2-3 range. It gives me an idea of where I'm at. And if they can tackle that really well, then I can push into something else. So yeah.
yeah. I told my kids when we worked on that, just you have to stop counting. You don't need to count here. It's all about the sounds.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
All right, the next piece is a grade two. This is called Hush by Bill Thomas, and this seems to be a pretty popular piece.
Yeah, Bill's a really great writer. There's an entire publishing company, a Canadian publishing company called Eighth Note, and they do lots and lots of Canadian repertoire. And Bill was a music teacher, and he's retired. He now is the band director at York University in Toronto, and he writes from a real music educator's perspective. And he has this piece, Hush, is just really beautifully written. It features woodwind, and it's great writing because it has this beautiful interior sort of harmony happening in your clarinets and saxophones. It builds nicely, but it's delicate, and it really works on teaching that skill to your students of playing with great tone at a quieter volume and really getting the story of the piece across. I think he does a great job with this, and it's a grade two. It's not horribly rangy. It's not particularly difficult. It's in a pretty standard key, but it sounds so good to the audience. And it's one that became very popular in festival in Canada. It was played quite a lot. It's been on the syllabus for a while. And I think in terms of the grade two pieces, I think it's one that's probably had a lot of play recently. So
Great, here it is, Hush by Bill Thomas. Okay, the next piece we're going to listen to, you have listed as a 3+. This is Film Vitae by Kenley Kristofferson.
Yeah, this is a really great piece. I absolutely love this piece, and it has led to something very cool at my school this year. We played it last year with my wind ensemble, and uh, I'm a big proponent of social media, and I post a lot of stuff about what my students are at. And I tagged Kenley in a post, and he messaged back, and he's like, "You're doing a beautiful job with this piece. I really like what you're doing with it. I have a new piece coming out next year. Would you guys like to premiere it?" And so that's been just the coolest experience this year that we're going to be premiering a piece for a composer. He lives out in Winnipeg, so a fair distance from where I am. He's going to fly in the spring, and we're going to do this. And it all came from Film Vitae, which was a piece that was recommended to me by a fellow band director. And it's such a neat piece. Kenley wrote it. He said, watching a nature film, he got really into the idea of watching the relationship between the orangutans and their trainers, and how there was this connection between the animal and the human. And he had this kind of idea that like the whole world is connected through, this thread of life, which is what Film Vitae means. It's Latin for the thread of life. And so the piece starts off, and it's this beautiful lyrical part. And Kenley composes using piano a lot, and obviously then takes that piano sort of approach of these interior moving lines and puts it into his band writing so well. And what makes it challenging is it starts in D flat, and then in the bridge of the piece, it has this really cool kind of African savanna thing where a djembe comes out of nowhere, and he modulates into D minor and has a whole different kind of feel in the middle of it. And then it goes back into D flat major and sort of comes back to the original themes of the piece. It's just a great piece for a band who's looking to challenge themselves with getting outside of their comfort level, but not going crazy with something that's really going to be rhythmically tough or really rangy. It doesn't go too high. It's got some really interesting stuff happening in it. So one of my favorite pieces I've done with my students in recent years, without question.
Okay, the fifth and final piece we're going to listen to is ISS Flyover by Pete Meechan. This is a grade 4.
Yeah, this is a really cool piece. It's rhythmically complicated. He based it on the idea of the International Space Station flying over top. So it's got a very kind of, space epic film score approach to it. This really cool repetitive mallet part that is almost like a code type thing that you would hear that would repeat over and over and again throughout the piece. We had a really neat experience with this piece because it was actually one we did in the pandemic in the virtual recording setting. One of the local universities in our area reached out and said, we're doing all these crazy little box recordings where everybody's in a little box in their corner. He's like, why don't we do as many as we can? So the 5 high schools in the university combined, there was like 400 kids or something in this video, and we did ISS Flyover. And it was such a cool experience because the students had to learn it on their own. And there's some tricky runs. There's some challenging sort of flute and clarinet arpeggio stuff. But I said, this is a grade 4, guys. This is a piece you're going to have to put some legwork into. But I think it's got, when you hear it, it sounds like this really great film score, and you can visualize this International Space Station flying over top of you while it's going. It's just a well written piece of music. I love the way Pete writes. Pete is based out in Winnipeg as well, originally from England, and he has some wonderful repertoire that is a little more challenging. He writes a lot of stuff in the grade 3, grade 4 range, but I would like to say like a film score approach. He's very good at painting pictures with sound in what he does.
So we're going to close with just talking about some tips for band directors or ideas that you have, because as a bass player, as a jazz bass player, and as a vocalist, there's a lot of things that we can incorporate as teachers. So let's talk about bass first.
Yeah, sure. So like that's my primary instrument. I studied bass at university. I'm an electric and an upright player, which is totally not your norm for band directing. I'm not a brass or woodwind player, and I had to actually spend a lot of time learning how to play brass and woodwind instruments myself. But I think one of the things that's so useful from having that background is my approach to rhythm. You know, jazz and bass playing in general, that is your job. You're the ground rhythm. You're the foundation of the sound. And I spent so long sitting with a metronome and figuring out all these rhythms when I was studying that I find that I have a pretty good approach to attacking rhythm with band. And rhythmic pieces I don't have much trouble with, because I approach it with the kids like, yeah, you need to read it, but here's what it feels like. Here's where these sit. You know, I don't think of it as the and of four. This is an anticipated one. And the line actually starts here. And that approach has been really helpful. And coming from a jazz background, that has been a useful tool to have. The other thing that I found is I came into music teaching from a performance of a gigging musician. So I always think about preparing my kids to perform. That was always my approach. I never came from it from a pedagogical approach of like, oh, I need to teach them these skills of this and that. It's always about, okay, here's the gig we have to do. How do I get them to play this gig at a high level? And I bring that approach to my band directing. So if I know we have a concert, this is the audience, this is what I need to do. It's always approaching it from here's where we're going to go. I always think performing. I don't think about a bigger picture type thing. And I find that's been really helpful.
Yeah, you talked about rhythm and feel, right? I mean, I think there's teachers who teach by rote only in a lot of ways that limits their students because they can't read anything, right? Yeah. But when you take what they can read, but then you incorporate the full body, you talk about how it feels and you describe it, that's huge. I think that's such a bonus.
Absolutely. It's such a big part of what they do. Like one of the first things I'll have my students do is we will listen to the piece while they read it, because I want them to hear what it's supposed to sound like. Because sometimes they'll decipher and look at a rhythm and go, "Oh, the rhythm is this," but they don't understand how it contextually fits into the music,
sure,
what the feel of that is. So I encourage them. I'm like, play along with a recording. Absolutely, play along with the recording, because then you're going to understand that particular pulse that you're doing, whether it's like, a triplet subdivision or these three. I find a lot of composers use this, like where they take the eighth notes, it's 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1, and I'm like, here's what that feels like, and here's why we're doing it in this piece. And having them understand that is a lot better than just reading it going, oh, it's the and of two, and not really. There's a pulse that they're trying to create. There's a feel they're trying to create in it. So,
and for people who maybe don't agree with that, I'm not one of them, but what would you think if your kids went and sat in with the local symphony and your kid got to sit in that symphony orchestra and play along? Like, everybody would think that's an amazing opportunity for their kids. Oh, sure. And that's basically what they're doing. They're putting on this professional recording and playing along with that. So I think it's huge. Love it.
And they're going to, they're going to hear what it's supposed to sound like. It's supposed to sound a certain way. And this kind of came out of the pandemic, because this is how we had to play in the pandemic.
Yeah, for sure.
And I realized, like, when we came out of the pandemic, I had this idea that my students were going to really struggle, and they didn't struggle as much as I thought they were going to. There were some kids that came out, and I'm like, wow, your tone's actually better than it was a year ago. What have you been doing? And they're like, well, I've been practicing long tones because I'm at home. Oh, and I've been playing along with these recordings. And they're trying to sound like the trumpet on the recording, who's some crazy studio musician that's come into the Alfred reading session and is, a world-class trumpet player. I'm like, well, heck, you want to sound like that person. Of course you do. So it's really useful to do. Like, I don't want them, I agree with what you're saying. I never want them to use that as a crutch for not reading. They've got to read. And I have them read regularly at rehearsal. But there's nothing wrong with having the aid of audio with it. That's okay to have, as long as they don't start learning by ear exclusively.
And I'll have some times when I'll take my two bands and we're combining them for a concert, but they don't rehearse together, right? And
Yeah.
it's like if it's the younger group and maybe the piece is a little bit of a push, and all the clarinets are playing the second part and all the flutes are playing the second part, and it's good because they're gonna be playing with the older group eventually.
Right.
So it's not that I just do that to mask their problems, but they get an idea about what it's going to feel like, and I think that's motivating for them too.
Yeah. And that's a great idea. I love that idea of combining. I often, with my young wind ensemble, I will pull in what I call like senior mentors. So I'll grab a grade 12 clarinet player and have them sit in on a rehearsal with my grade nines, just so the grade nines hear what the grade 12 kid sounds like. And they go, oh, okay, I'm supposed to sound like that. I'm like, yeah, that's what good tone sounds like.
Mhm.
And she can explain to them on their level, like, here's how you do it and here's what you need to do. So I'm a big proponent of that too. I love the idea of combining my kids.
And what part of your life as a vocalist do you bring in as a band director?
I am a huge fan of the idea that the kids need to be able to sing pitch to create pitch. They need to hear it in their head. I don't expect my band kids to be great singers. That's not what I'm asking them to do. But if they understand what they're doing mechanically in their body to create the sound C, it helps them produce that C on their horn. They can produce it a lot better. And for me, one of the things that's been so helpful, I sing a lot of a cappella stuff. I sing with a men's choir, I sing in a quartet. My ear for tuning has improved so much just from singing. I hear tuning a lot better because as a singer, you have to really, like when you're out of tune, it is obvious. It is very obvious. Whereas that if you're in a wind ensemble with 60, 70 players and you're a clarinet and you're slightly out of tune, you might hide a little bit. You're not going to hide in a quartet singing. So just it develops your ears so much, and it helps them internalize what pitch am I trying to create, what is supposed to be coming out of my horn, and if they can sing it, they can in theory play it. And I have had a lot of workshops with really well-known band clinicians in the last few years where this has become quite a thing. Like they often get my kids singing, and students don't like it. Band kids are like, I'm not in choir, I don't want to. But I'm like, no, it's not about you being a great singer. It's about you understanding the internal pitch and how you want to create it. So
I remember being a decent freshman trumpet player, and I made honor band, but I was like near the bottom of the section somewhere. And then my chorus teacher said, "Hey, you're going to come sing in the choir." And I was like, "Okay, but I can't match pitch." She said, "Sure you can." So this was amazing. She was at the piano and she said, "Just sing any note." And I just sang whatever note came out. And then she was brilliant is that she found whatever note that was. It was probably a low A or something like that. And then, so she played it again. She said, "Can you sing the note again?" I said, "Okay." So I sang it again. And then she said, "Great." And she matched it again. And then she said, "Now I'm just going to move up in chromatics a little bit. Can you come with me?" So then I was able to feel right away what that sound like. She came to me. And then before you knew it, within a day, I was matching pitch within the bass staff, right? I couldn't go high, super low, but it was like an instant way. And then in joining choir and then chamber singers, like, man, my playing just completely took off because you're right. It was all the oral model that was in my ears. And now it just comes out of my trumpet, but it's all the same.
we're really lucky at the school I teach at. We have a very strong choral program. Our choir actually was at Carnegie Hall last year performing as part of their concert series. And I find a lot of my band kids who join choir end up being better band kids because they're starting to understand just a different way that music works and how it's supposed to sound. And it's just a really, it adds a level. It adds something. The mechanics of, yeah, you need good posture on your instrument. You need to do this with your embouchure. You need this air support to create whatever pitch on your instrument. But having an idea what that's supposed to sound like and having an idea of how you have to create that as a vocalist helps you play so well. And it's funny, like you talk about how your teacher had that experience where it said, "Oh, you can't match pitch." We always say that to kids. Like kids are like, "Oh, I can't sing." I'm like, everybody can sing. That's a North American thing. You go to Europe and you go to a soccer game where there's 100,000 people singing. They don't say, "Oh, I can't sing." We have this idea in North America that you have to be a good singer to sing. It's this whole like American Idol thing of like, "Oh, you're not good enough." No, every human being has a voice. It is our first instrument, it is our primary instrument. And as a child, Every kid sings. Nobody ever questions it. And somehow we get educated out of it, and kids think, well, I'm a band kid, I'm not a singer. No, singing is the primal instrument that we have, and we have to understand how to use that as musicians. Every musician needs to. So,
All right, Dan, this has been great. Thank you. Appreciate the time very much as you're huddled up in your practice room at school with your timpani player.
yeah, I
Perhaps
got
in the
a
back.
couple percussionists working away in the background. So,
Love
but hey,
it.
let's be real. This is music teacher life.
That's right.
This is what it's like.
That's right. So as we close, I'm just looking for some advice you might have, especially for young teachers.
Absolutely. You know, I had a really cool experience last year where we had a drama teacher at our school retire, and he was a bit of a controversial teacher. He liked to do things his own way and kind of rub people the wrong way sometimes, but was really great with the kids. And he said something in his retirement speech that I thought was so profound. And he said, if I could give one piece of advice to young teachers, it would be to coach a team, run a club, run a band, you know, do something with students. He said, but do it all in. Go all the way in where you're going to feel things with those kids. You're going to laugh with them. You're going to cry with them. You're going to hurt with them. You're going to cheer with them in their successes, because he says that is authentic learning. And I think that my biggest piece of advice for music teachers is do that. Go all in and do this job with your total heart and soul and be passionate about it. It doesn't have to dominate your life. You know, we talked about having balance in this podcast today. We talked about the importance of taking care of ourselves, but you've chosen to do this job and you want to do it all the way, because that is when you really connect. And I often, like when I talk about my students, I never say, oh, they did this, they did this. I always say, we did this. You know, we had this award, we won this festival, we did this concert, we did this thing, because I don't separate myself from them. It is the same part. I am as much invested in it as they are. And that is real learning. That's where they connect. And if you want a strong music program that's going to grow and thrive, that connection has to be there. So as a young teacher, don't go halfway. Don't just do a little bit. Go all the way in. Go in and go with this with your full passion, where you're going to have things that are going to be wonderful, and you're going to have things where you're going to fail and you're going to feel really disappointed, and that's fine. But that's life. That's what we're trying to teach these kids. So that is my biggest piece of advice. Love this job and do it all the way with lots of passion.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.